you everyone for coming. So I'm going to give a quick introduction for Alex. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? In what ways do our unconscious lives affect our daily business? What we do every day. Is ideology at the root of what we would call the social order of today? Does ideology still exist? These are the questions that put forth by Slavoj Zizek. Born in 1949, he is just a few months older than my own father. He has been called the Elvis of cultural theory. He is considered a celebrity philosopher and could be the most famous philosopher still living. Born in Ljubljana, Slovenia, to atheist parents, he studied in his hometown all the way through his doctorate in philosophy, but finished his studies in Paris, where he studied psychoanalysis with J.A. Miller and Francois Renaud. So, Alex, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ethan. First of all, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not an expert in Zizek. I actually never read a single book from Zizek. I only read 1.5 of his academic papers. And I watched a few of his speeches talking about global capitalism and the problems with economy, politics, and other problems. And I watched some videos of his film analysis, Hitchcock and other directors. But then you will ask me, why am I doing this speech? Well, the most important reason is that because no one applied for today to give a speech, so I had to sacrifice myself. But another not so important reason is that the other director of this group, who is behind the camera, and our cameraman, and I used to talk about Zizek during this past a year or so, I guess. And also others who gravitated around our group. And a month ago we also had a debate about Zizek. So that was my inspiration to do this speech. Since this thing is clear, you'll probably be disappointed. I'm not going to talk about Zizek's philosophy or his main ideas that he puts in his books or papers. So I will just try to make you enjoy it tonight. And after you leave this room, even if you forget everything I said, I wouldn't mind. But if there is only one person who would find something helpful in one way or another, I will be very happy and satisfied. Okay, now let's go to start with who is Zizek. As Ethan said, he was born in Ljubljana, 1949, Slovenia. That time, the so-called Titoist Yugoslavia. That's very important for his future career because he, as a student and a doctor in philosophy, in those times, to be a professor, you had to be a member of the Communist Party. But in the 80s, he had some different interpretations of Marx that don't follow the mainstream interpretation. So he was not, from the 80s, he started becoming not very welcome in the academic circles. However, right after the breakup of communist Yugoslavia, he became internationally involved into academic life. So, but he still continued to follow this Marxist line. We might say that he's a Marxist or neo-Marxist, or maybe he's as someone put it, a cyber neo-Marxist, whatever that means. But he's trying to, his point is to criticize capitalist society from another perspective, not from the perspective as the communists or socialists during the Cold War did. Well, he's famous probably maybe about talking about Soros, how Soros takes from one hand, gives from the other hand, but actually what is he doing? He's making a profit. Or his famous example is the Starbucks example, which is, as he says, capitalism with a human face. Like before the breakup of communism, it was socialism with human faces, and now it's capitalism with human face. And he describes that this kind of capitalism uses charity in order to gain more profit. Like you go to Starbucks and they say in Starbucks, oh yes, this coffee is very expensive, but you know, a percent from this coffee goes to charity, to kids in Africa or anywhere in the world, so you don't feel guilty for doing that. And this is this is one of the ways that Zizek describes the capitalism of the human face. But on academic level, lately he's very interested into writing about Hegel. Hegel, maybe it's not very common known philosopher, a German philosopher, but he's the one that has been like before Marx. Marx drew ideas from Hegel, and as Marx says, he turned philosophy of Hegel from head onto feet. So if Hegel was the idealist dialectician or dialectic idealist, Marx is the dialectic materialist. Recently he wrote a book about Hegel, which is 1038 pages. Very long book. Hegel also wrote very big books. Just one point, it is interesting to know that in one of his last papers, I just read half of it, that's the one of the half I read, apart from the one that I read whole. He said that the most three famous philosophers in the Western philosophy are Plato, Descartes, and Hegel, which goes counter to the mainstream understanding of Western philosophy, according to which the three most important philosophers are Plato, Descartes, and Kant, Immanuel Kant. So he replaces Kant and puts Hegel in his place, which I went through the paper, I couldn't find the reasons, or maybe it was too difficult to understand and I didn't have time to go deeply, but I can understand because he's a Marxist. So he wants to put Hegel as a something that is a precedent to Marx, so he takes Kant out of it and puts Hegel. Okay, anyway, I won't go deeply into philosophy as I said before. Why did I call Zizek a peripatetic philosopher of the 21st century? Peripatetic means walker or traveler, and it comes from the ancient Greek word peripatetic, which comes from Aristotle. Aristotle was a philosopher who liked to walk while he was teaching, so they called him a peripatetic philosopher, a walking philosopher. So that's why I call Zizek walking philosopher, because he walks, or maybe he flies. He goes to other places, and he doesn't select his audience. I mean, he's not selective which audience. He goes everywhere in the world where they invite him or where he applies. I don't know how that works. What came to my mind about how to understand Zizek is he as a Western philosopher. The first question is, what is Western philosopher? Is it a philosopher who was born in the West, who lives in the West, or is it a philosopher who, no matter where he was born, he deals with Western philosophy? But anyway, we call Zizek Western philosopher, and the character of Western philosophy, according to my understanding, goes like this. Most of the Western philosophers are closed in their rooms when they write. They don't communicate in others. So take this loosely. I mean, of course they do, but like just when they're creating their philosophies. So they're in their room, they write their ideas, they talk to themselves, they don't talk to each other, to anyone else. They might have a small window looking outside for a while, seeing people, cars, horses in the past, whatever, but they go back into their table and continue writing their books. So they're closed, they're office philosophers. So they create their philosophies without any communication with other people. So I still say take this loosely. Of course there is a communication, but most of it is by themselves. As an exception to this trend of Western philosophy is actually Plato, one of the first Western philosophers. So after that they didn't follow his trend. Because Plato was among the people, he was not in a room. He was always among people, and if you see, Plato wrote dialogues. So always in Plato's books there are dialogues, people talking to each other, interacting. Plato puts his ideas into Socrates' mouth, and they argue, and they come to some solution. So why am I saying this? Actually, it came to my mind that I can compare this with Chinese philosophy. Let's say the character of Chinese philosophy is totally opposite from the Western philosophy. They are always outside. They are never closed. You can take the books of Confucius, Mencius, any other philosopher, you can see they're all dialogues, something like Plato. They're always communicating to the people and trying to solve problems that are among the people. They're not just closed there and trying to solve problem with what is, I don't know, the truth of something, of what is the being. Is it a matter of idea? No, they're going there and trying to solve problems that are relevant to the people. So that's the character of Chinese philosophy. And of course, there is also one exception. I still remind you, take this loosely. Okay? There is one exception, also from the beginning, and that's Lao Tzu. He was a philosopher that didn't go outside talking to people. He was closed in his room, writing his ideas, not communicating to each other, but just to himself. Okay, why did I say this? Where is Zizek here as a Western philosopher? First of all, I think we can say there are two Zizeks. The one is the academic Zizek, and the other one is the Zizek that we watch on TV, on YouTube, in the newspapers, reading his columns. The first one goes along with the character of Western philosophy. He is in his room writing about Hegel or Descartes, Spinoza, Lacan, psychoanalysis, all these problems, and they're very, very complicated arguments, long, some would say difficult to understand. He writes long books. So the first Zizek is the one that goes with the character of Western philosophy. The second one, on the contrary, is an exception, like Plato or like the Chinese philosophers. He goes outside, he sees what's happening, a bomb in Norway, 70 people died, Starbucks selling coffee and with charity, saying that they do charity for starving kids in Africa. And he takes these ideas and goes and discusses with people. So this second Zizek is the one that goes out of the trend of Western philosophy. This second Zizek is the one that is not only read by few, like the philosophers closed in their rooms. So only few can understand. Only those who are initiated into philosophy can understand his ideas. This second Zizek talks to everyone. It's for everyone, for every single person on earth. Maybe you might ask a question: how to study Zizek, or where to start from if we want to study Zizek's ideas? Like, there are so many books he wrote, papers and speeches, and someone wants to know everything or most of it, and you ask probably an expert and say, okay, how do I study Zizek? Where do I go from? Which book to read first? Which speech to watch first? Well, my answer would be, you can start from anywhere. Doesn't matter. You can go from one book to another, from one speech to another. Sometimes they are also related, sometimes they are not, but you can still go and from one speech to another. Thank you. To understand these teachings. Saying this, it reminds me also on what contemporary professor of philosophy, Hans-Georg Möller, M-O-E-L-L-E-R. That's a German name, but he teaches in Canada. Reminds me of him, who talks about, I will go back to Lao Tzu again. He talks about how to read Lao Tzu. Like, he says, like, the book of Lao Tzu is consisted of some chapters, and they are not connected to each other. Like, you start from chapter 1, chapter 2, and go to chapter 2 and say, no, but chapter 2 doesn't relate to chapter 1, and chapter 3 doesn't relate to chapter 2, so there must be something. How do we find this order? So Miller says that there is actually no order. The book was first came as an oral tradition, like oral transmission, and then it was put into book, into two covers. But the order is not necessarily how it is, or actually there is no order. From one chapter you can go to another chapter and go back to see other chapters, and that's how you understand it. So he calls Lao Tzu's book hypertext. It's actually like a non-linear text, like hypertext, like text on internet. When you go on internet, when you surf, where to start from? Okay, you search something and say where to start from. There are so many links. You go through one. You finish with that. You go to another. There is no start, no end. Or, which is even more interesting, from one article you can go into another because there are links. There is a networking from one, and they're in the blue color. You click there, you go to another, you find similar information or even more information about that. The reason why I'm saying this is because I want to connect with Zizek. Because Zizek, if you take Zizek speeches, they are all like hypertext. You can start from one speech, you can go to another speech, or you can see what speech finish, end it or stop at the middle, and go to another one. If you know the links, of course. Like if he mentions something like 70, the Breivik case in Norway, oh, you can, on another speech he also talks about it. Then you go to that speech to hear something more about it. So Zizek is a phenomenon, is a kind of a hypertext, I would say. And there is one last thing I want to say. Zizek criticizes global capitalism. He claims that himself is a kind of communist, Marxist, or leftist, radical leftist. But the problem is, he does not offer a solution. Even he himself knows that. Even when he is asked, he says, no, I don't have a solution. He just wants people to think. This is a very, the very point that he's criticized about. He doesn't give a solution, but I could understand he doesn't probably dare, and nobody dares today to give a solution after so many years of Cold War and what happened with Stalinism and Nazism and anything. Nobody dares to give a solution, so nor Zizek, he doesn't dare to do that. As I mentioned before, that his parallel with Zizek and Lao Tzu, the difference between them two is that Lao Tzu does. He gives a solution, which now it's not the time to go for that. Yeah, I think this would be what I had prepared for today.
Okay, thanks, Alex.